President Edgar Lungu was 68 years of age. The president offers his condolences to President Lungu's family, friends, and the people of Zambia. President Lungu has been receiving medical care here in South Africa for an extended period. Government, the Lungu family, and the Zambian High Commission will undertake the necessary processes to give effect to the wishes of the Lungu family. May President Lungu's soul rest in peace.
It is with a very heavy heart that we have received the sad news of the passing on of our beloved sixth Republican President of the Republic of Zambia, Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu. We believed and prayed that Dr. Lungu will go through his medical checkups and indeed his operations if need be and return to Zambia. But God Almighty knew why this did not happen. We are very sad and very, very disturbed by this news. Zambians are mourning as this news has just broken. On behalf of Zambia Must Prosper, my political party, which is a member of the Tonse Alliance, we send heartfelt condolences to the entire country of Zambia and indeed the SADC region on the loss of Edgar Chagwa Lungu, our sixth Republican president from Zambia.
We know that he wasn't well. There was a time where he wanted to come to South Africa for medical treatment, and there were challenges in terms of the approval for him to come to South Africa for medical treatment. But I guess later on he was able to do just that. He hasn't been well. You'd recall that it was some few years ago in 2015 when he came to South Africa for medical treatment at Mill Park Hospital. At that time, I remember we even went there to speak to the people who had accompanied him and him after a short medical checkup at Mill Park Hospital. On the very same day, the SABC team that was doing that story was marked. You recall that trending video when we were marked at the bridge there at Mill Park. We were actually covering his story when he was admitted at the Mill Park Hospital. And while we were doing that, then the thugs came and they take cell phones and some equipment there. It was at that time when he was at the hospital at Mill Park. But then later, clearly, his health wasn't that good, and he constantly had to receive medical attention. And as I pointed out, there was a time where he wanted to come to South Africa after he left office, but he had challenges to come to South Africa for medical treatment. Now we are told that he was in the country receiving medical treatment, and he has passed on.
Profound sorrow that we announce the passing of His Excellency, Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, sixth President of the Republic of Zambia, who departed this morning at 06 hours at Medifarm Clinic, a center in South Africa. My father, President Lungu, had been under medical supervision in recent weeks. His condition was managed with dignity and privacy, with support from all well-wishers. In this moment of grief, we invoke the spirit of one Zambia, one nation. The timeless creed that guided President Lungu's service to our country.
Any former president will have huge influence in a particular country, the country that he once led. Of course, perhaps not massive as it was when he's in office, but he had left his party, that is the Patriotic Front, because there were power struggles in that party, and then he bought a small party that is the National Congress Party. And then he was negotiating with another party, ZMP, that is Zambia Must Prosper. And they were intending to form a coalition to contest elections next year. In fact, a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we spoke to the leader of that party that he was negotiating with, Mr. Bala, in terms of the preparations for elections. And therefore, he was still influential, and as I pointed out, the small party that was setting up a coalition with the party called Zambia Must Prosper, with the hope that they'll be able to wrestle power from Hakainde Hichilema, who is currently the president of Zambia. And therefore, he was still influential, trying to build a new home after he left the Patriotic Front because of the power struggle, because the problem, the one deputy wanted to take over as the president of that party, and much as he was not a leader in government anymore, Lungu was resisting, and clearly there was a tension, and therefore he left and then started to rebuild this party, the small party, and hoping that he can go into alliance with this other party, as I pointed out, to build an alliance to contest elections next year under the banner of the coalition, but not him contesting as the presidential candidate, but the president of the Zambia Must Prosper, Mr. Bala, was the one who was going to be a presidential candidate, and I think he will continue to be a presidential candidate. Actually, I was talking to his people yesterday, and they were preparing yesterday. They had a media briefing, and now this news. And a few minutes ago, I spoke to Mr. Bwala of the ZMP, who extended his condolences. We'll carry that message later. We'll process that clip very soon, and we'll get more details later today and tomorrow from his party, and perhaps from the government of Zambia, because he is a former president. I think it will be a mixed bag. I guess those who believe in him and who supported him will indicate that he was a good leader, but clearly he lost elections, and he lost to Hakainde Hichilema because you had a huge constituency or group of people within the population. They were not happy about his performance, and therefore that is why today you have Hakainde Hichilema. You'd recall how he tormented Hakainde Hichilema when Hakainde Hichilema was in the opposition bench, arresting him, harassing him, and finally he won and he became the president. The sad thing is that now again we had reports and in later years where there were allegations that the very same Edgar Lungu was being harassed by the current government, and therefore you know all the time when somebody gets into power, sometimes he gets so vindictive and it's payback time. Sometimes it's because the person who's out of power is still destabilizing the new person, and therefore there's that kind of a tension. And we've seen it in South Africa, where a former doesn't see eye to eye with the current, and later that very same current who's now a former destabilizing the person who's in office. So it has become a trend on the continent where there's this hostility between former sitting president and a former president and the sitting president, and therefore Zambia was not a unique story. I cannot speculate. I'm sure the Zambian government would want to give him a state funeral because he's a former sitting president. But I don't know whether the family will accept that, or his party will accept that, or the alliance will accept that. But I can see President Hakainde Hichilema. I know him very, very well. When he was under siege from the very same Edgar Lungu, we used to cover his stories during elections. He's that very humble person. But as I pointed out in recent times, there were people who were saying that he is not a Hichilema, you know. But for me, I've met him many times. The last time I spoke to Hichilema was in Namibia at the inauguration of the president of Namibia. He was still the Hichilema I know. He waited, he spoke to us with that humble manner of engaging with the media. And I think the Hichilema I know would want to do just that, to discharge his responsibility as a sitting head of state, respecting that this person was a former head of state. I expect him to put aside the political differences. The Hishelema, I know. I don't know whether perhaps I'm too optimistic, but I can't see President Hishelema not doing what needs to be done in relation to the constitution of that country when a former head of state has passed on in that country. But it will depend on the negotiations, because remember, at the end of the day, you engage the family, you engage people around that person to agree on a particular process or way of sending off a person who was a leader. And therefore, that's my view. You'd recall Lungu had a very strong relationship with the president of Zimbabwe, Emmerson Mnangagwa. I wouldn't be surprised if Mnangagwa would want to attend a funeral. He had a very strong bond with the former South African president, Jacob Zuma, and therefore I'm expecting those leaders to be at that funeral. So I think no matter how difficult behind the scenes it can be, and politically, President Hakainde Hichilema will try to ensure that there's professionalism in terms of how the country conducts itself at this challenging moment.